Well, welcome to the 700 Club. It looks like a bomb went off. Scenes of utter demolition throughout the Bahamas, body counts rising, and dramatic rescues underway. This unimaginable humanitarian crisis. Now it's a Cat 2. Dorian is down but not out. Still unknown where it will strike next. But Heather Sells has this alarming report.
This is the scene after Dorian's brutal attack on the Bahamas. Total devastation. Debris that was once people's homes, now covering the ground with wreckage. Hitting as a Category 5 storm with winds over 200 miles an hour, Dorian was the most powerful storm in recorded history here. It targeted the Abaco and Grand Bahama Islands, known for their marinas, golf courses, and all-inclusive resorts. Even worse, Dorian stalled over these islands and their 70,000 people for 2 days.
Well, going through it was terrifying. We're happy to be alive, glad that my family is safe.
Rescuers report seeing bodies floating in the water. The final death toll won't be known for days. The U.S. Coast Guard is helping lead search and rescue, but there's still areas that first responders can't reach. People are using boats, even jet skis, to try and reach those who have lost everything. A humanitarian crisis is emerging in the Bahamas. The main hospital on Grand Bahama is unusable. Homes are destroyed, and more than 60,000 people need food and clean drinking water. And Dorian's not done. It's now a Category 2 storm, but with winds at 110 miles an hour, it's still considered dangerous. Authorities have asked 2 million people in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas to evacuate.
This is a very serious storm, and a western shift, that is towards land, of just a few miles could bring enormous damage.
Even if Dorian doesn't make landfall in the U.S., it could bring storm surge and severe flooding. In low-lying Charleston, South Carolina, authorities are racing to move hospital patients to higher ground. In Savannah, Georgia, they have provided buses for families to get out.
Well, I don't have a vehicle and I don't have the finance to go out of town.
In Florida, Dorian has already grounded thousands of flights and shut down several airports. And it's battering Florida's coast as it makes its way north. CBN's Eric Phillips is waiting out the storm in Daytona Beach.
Leading up to the storm's arrival, Daytona's weather started to deteriorate with bursts of rain and wind. It prompted those with hurricane fatigue to brave the technically closed beach.
1 minute, I'm all nervous and scared that everything's going to blow away, and then it's tracking off in a different direction, and then it stops. It's just, this one's been really unpredictable.
Hilaire Sartain gave us an interesting comparison to describe Dorian.
Being stalked by a slow-moving turtle, as my friend says. It's finally here, but it's taken its sweet time. The excitement has worn off, I'd say.
Perhaps the excitement has waned, but officials say vigilance cannot.
Things can change for the better, but unfortunately, as we know, they can still change for the worse.
And some of the worst has come out during this emergency. Officials say an elderly woman and a blind man have been bilked out of their money by scammers.
The objective here is you got to be a real scumbag if you're going to attack people who are blind and people who are in their extremely elderly and show up and try to scam them out of tens of thousands of dollars.
One of the many reasons why people here say they'll be glad when this is all over.
All the surfers have been watching this storm, and we're just ready to get out there and catch some waves finally. It's been a bad summer for us in Florida. We're ready for some hurricanes as well, so it's on.
Well, CBN reporter Eric Phillips is in Daytona Beach, where the wind and rain are coming ashore. Eric, tell us what's happening right now.
Well, Pat, we are here at the time at which those tropical storm force winds are getting to be at their worst. You can see right behind me that the ocean is really more powerful and angry looking than it has been in the last couple of days since we've been here covering this story. They're expecting wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour here in Daytona Beach, and we have felt them from time to time. They've just not been consistent. One moment it'll be windy and torrential downpours. The next moment, it'll be a little bit lighter like it is now, and the wind's not blowing as much. Still, some of the bridges in the area have been closed off. The area here at the ocean front has been evacuated. People have boarded up their homes and businesses and headed to nearby shelters just to be on the safe side. The reality, Pat, is people here have been waiting for days for Dorian to dot Daytona's door, and it's finally happening. How powerful it will be ultimately is still yet to be seen. Bear in mind, though, high tide is coming today at 12 noon.
Is the mood, are they frightened or just tired of waiting for it? Well, what's the mood?
I think if I had to characterize the mood, Pat, I would say that they are hurricane fatigued. This has been a slow-moving storm. It's coming, it's still coming, it's still coming, and people have been prepared for it for some time. Bear in mind that we are in an area that's used to getting hurricanes. They've dealt with them many times before. What they're not used to is, though, the unpredictability of this storm, whereby the track has changed several times. It's sped up, it's slowed down. And so really, I think people here just want it to come if it's coming or not if it's not, but they want to get on with their lives one way or the other.
Eric, have you got any official reports of expected damage?
So far here in Volusia County, we have not heard any reports of damages just yet. Now, again, it's still kind of coming through, making its way from southern Brevard County into Volusia, so I'm sure we will see some damage in the coming hours. But I do have a report in terms of power outages, and right now in the state of Florida, there are about 10,000 people without power. 2,000 of them, Pat, are here in Volusia County.
Eric, thank you so much. Eric Phillips in Daytona Beach, Florida, and they're waiting. Dorian hasn't really come ashore yet.
Well, I guess South Carolina is the place now. They're really worried that it's going to make landfall. And my parents are hopefully in their car leaving South Carolina. They have a little place in Myrtle Beach that they like to go to and hang out. And I called him yesterday. I said, hey, are you guys what are you going to do? Because I honestly thought they would hunker down because they're sort of adventurous and storm chasers. But fortunately, they are heeding the warning and the evacuation orders. They're on their way home, as far as I know.
Although those interstates are so jammed up right now, 95 is just crowded. It's just like a parking lot all the way up.
My mom said she didn't want to be there when the electricity went out, and I don't blame her for that.
Well, good for her. Well, in other news, major developments in England, where a revolt in Parliament over the Brexit deal could lead to a whole new election. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington.
That is right, Pat. Defiant British lawmakers are moving to block British Prime Minister Boris Johnson from pursuing a no-deal Brexit from the European Union. Johnson is retaliating by announcing plans to call an early general election, in a bid for a new parliament that would back his Brexit policy. But that would also put his own future and that of his Conservative Party on the line. What could happen next includes new legislation in Parliament to block a no-deal Brexit, a no-confidence motion against the British Prime Minister, or potential no agreement, which would mean a so-called hard Brexit on the Halloween deadline. And there is always the possibility of a Brexit agreement. There is now real concern a hard Brexit will mean economic and travel chaos if no agreement is reached between the United Kingdom and the EU. Worst-case forecasts show Britain's gross domestic product shrinking by 10% or more. And the European Union has said it would treat the UK travelers like those from a third world country, leading to significant delays. Well, Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie says she is withdrawing a China extradition bill that sparked months of protests. Fearing more control from mainland China and less freedom in Hong Kong, protesters have filled the streets for 13 weeks. Clashes between police and protesters have become increasingly violent, with demonstrators throwing gasoline bombs at officers last weekend and authorities using water cannons, tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons. Chinese forces are on the border, and Beijing has said it will intervene, ominously warning recently, Pat, the end is coming.
Well, I just think it would be tragic if China moved across that border. It would spark international opprobrium against China, and they know that they can't do it. But taking away that extradition treaty was a smart. Well, they should have pulled it a long time ago. But some of the big players, Li Ka-shing and Hutchison Whampoa and these big companies, they are enormously wealthy people, and they just can't stand all of their revenue to go away and the tourist industry to fail and the property values to go down. They're facing huge billion-dollar losses, and I'm not quite sure what those demonstrators want. They've gotten it when Lamb pulled that one extradition treaty off, and I think they ought to cool it now. If they don't, it can lead to a terrible confrontation. John?
Pat, back here at home, it was a year ago when America witnessed a new low in politics with the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. And though it may be hard to imagine, it could get even uglier for the next Supreme Court nominee.
Lawmakers returned this week to a quiet Capitol Hill, a far cry from what it was just a year ago when the confirmation hearing of Justice Brett Kavanaugh devolved into what many observers called a circus.
Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to have this loudmouth removed.
This is getting into the twilight zone.
Carrie Severino co-authored Justice on Trial, a new book with insider accounts of key players from the White House to the Senate and the Supreme Court. She told CBN News Kavanaugh's confirmation was less about him and more about politicization of the court, a deep public divide, and a well-coordinated effort between special interests, PR teams, and the media.
So all of those went together to produce really the worst confirmation process we've seen in American history.
While President Trump called for a swift bipartisan vote, the hearings instead moved slowly, filled with sordid allegations of alcohol abuse, assault, and rape.
I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me.
I'm here today to tell the truth. I've never sexually assaulted anyone, not in high school, not in college, not ever.
Severino says it was just as volatile behind the scenes, including one account just before the committee vote when tempers flared.
That room was full of dozens of people, senators, their staffers, and a fist fight nearly broke out. And one of the points of concern there was the frustration that they felt like senators weren't playing it straight and that there was interference by the staff that was inappropriate.
As Kavanaugh returns to his second term in October, fallout from his contentious hearing still remains. Republicans who supported him are locked in tough re-election bids, and some White House hopefuls say they're open to packing the court. Severino warns filling the next Supreme Court vacancy could actually be worse.
What concerns me is, of course, the next seat could be a liberal justice stepping down with Donald Trump making the replacement. And that, if you think Kennedy to Kavanaugh is a shift, you know, a liberal justice, Justice Ginsburg, for example, to a Trump nominee would be a night and day change on the court. And I think we could see the incentives built to have an even more outrageous nomination process.
Pat, it is hard to even fathom something more outrageous.
Those hearings, the accuser of Judge Kavanaugh had a rather checkered past. And it was told that in her yearbook there were some accusations made against her, and every single copy of that yearbook was mysteriously taken off the market, and nobody knew where they were. They couldn't find them, and the senators didn't dare to question her because she was making allegations that were just not true. But the next time, I think they've got it locked in. The Judiciary Committee is in strong hands. If the Senate stays the way it is with Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, they're not going to let that circus take place. And it's going to be a quickie. I mean, they won't need all those votes because they played, Harry Reid played the nuclear option, and it's been played, and so now you need a simple majority. You don't need 2/3 or any of that stuff. And they've got the majority, and the next justice, it will swing the court dramatically to a conservative point of view. I'm told that Justice Sotomayor may have some health issues. Of course, the dear lady who's got cancer, she's a survivor. She'll probably outlive all of us, but nevertheless, there is a judicial washout, and there'll be several vacancies, I think, for President Trump, and it's going to be interesting. By the way, we had a wonderful guest yesterday, Jonathan Cahn. He was talking about the Oracle, and it opened after our interview on Amazon. It was the #3 book in America.
Wow.
Out of all the fiction, all the books, it was #3. And Jonathan Cahn, the interview was fantastic. We loved it. What he had to say was riveting. And the people in this audience really responded. I'm pleased to report that because of this audience, the sales went up to #3 in America out of all the books. #1 Christian book, everything.
#1.
The next day, he wasn't on the 700 Club. It's dropped down to 131.
So, the power of Pat.
Yeah, we've got a tremendous audience, and any author out there that's got a book, you don't tell us you don't want to come on the 700 Club because we sell more books than anybody.
Yeah. Well, you know, he's fascinating. And
well, he was a marvelous, he's so exciting.
He is. I love his stuff.
Well, he led the chapel, and the people were just mesmerized by what he had to say. He's a great guy.
Great guy, and a great guy, too, yeah.
Wonderful friend.